Now Sweeney, Dwayne Sweeney! Sweeney's over!
Can you please hand it over to your captain, Dwayne Sweeney?
Welcome to Real Tales with Sweens, proudly brought to you by Fish City Hamilton. Fish City has been servicing the Waikato's fishing, boating and outdoor needs for over 30 years. Now, with the help of their online store, their great range of products and outstanding customer service are available across New Zealand. This episode, I sit down over coffee with David Galbraith. DG is well known for his work as a mental skills coach, having worked with the Chiefs, New Zealand Sevens and Japan Rugby. His skills are also utilised by High Performance Sport New Zealand, where he works with a number of Olympic athletes, including New Zealand's most successful Olympian of all time, Lisa Carrington. During this podcast, we get some great insight into dealing with elite athletes at the top of their game. DG shares some background into his journey to becoming one of New Zealand's most renowned mental skills coaches, including how his rural upbringing shaped his character, dealing with serious offenders in life or death situations, and how speaking to a club rugby team on a cold winter's night changed his life forever. We also discuss the impact he had on my professional rugby career and so much more. As always, the show notes will be available on Real Tales with Sweens Instagram and Facebook pages, as well as the website realtaleswithsweens.com. Good George have a 15% discount available for all you listeners. Just use the discount code REALTALES before checking out of their online store. The link for their store is available on the realtaleswithsweens.com homepage. Lastly, I want to say a special thank you to DG for coming on and sharing some great insight with us. It was awesome to reconnect, mate, and I can't wait for the next one. So join me as we get to know David Galbraith. Enjoy the podcast.
Makes a completely different coffee.
Yeah, it does, eh? Yeah, well, that's what I noticed a lot too, because I've got an espresso machine at home, like a really good one, and you got to have good milk because it just ruins the coffee if you don't have the cream in it. Yeah. So I don't understand how people have like almond milk and stuff.
Yeah, I can't either. What's the other one? Oat milk.
Oat, yeah.
It's like oats for eating.
Yeah. And I'm sure it can't be milk. It must be just like juice.
Yeah, totally. How can they call that milk? That's not milk.
Yeah.
It's actually...
I love to watch someone try and milk an oat.
Imagine how many oats you have to have in your herd.
Oh, I know.
How big's your herd? 75,000.
Yeah. Milk them all by hand.
Yeah.
Mm.
One little squeeze. Yes, there's things in life which are...
Have you got a teaspoon, DG? I can just stir that with?
Yeah. There's certain things in life aren't supposed to be mucked around with. I mean, basics. Leave it alone.
Yeah. I have this interesting theory, and you'll probably agree with me, but I reckon a lot of what happens to the human body is what you tell it. Yeah.
Totally.
And the more I learned, I suppose, like through my career and stuff, I kind of learned that. But when I reckon if you had two kids, you know, like same genetics, and then you separate, like even like twins, separate them at birth, put one in a world where everything bad was good and vice versa, and then they grew up that way, they would be healthy and the rest of it just because their whole psyche is like, that's good for me, that's not.
Yeah.
And then the way that they went through their life, I reckon would, yeah.
Well, perspective is everything.
Yeah.
It's unreal. Like even, you talk to athletes that are going through the hole and they'll come to you depressed. And that's what someone will ring you for. Can you see so-and-so? Because I'm really worried about them. And then you'll be like, let them talk about it. And then you'll say to them, okay, what's the gift? And they're like, what? And you're like, well, what? And I heard you, and you sound like it's tough. And they're like, yeah. So what's the gift? And I go, I can't see it. I go, no, that's why you're struggling. It feels like the universe has just kicked you up the arse and told you the recipe you've been living by ain't the recipe. So if you hadn't had this moment, you could be another 5-10 years down the track of suffering.
Yeah.
But the gift is whatever it is giving you got your attention.
Yeah. Now you know you need to change.
Now you need to change.
Yeah.
And they're like,
that's what I love about talking to you, DG. You make everything so simple.
C- at university.
It was even the other day when you come and spoke to us at with the Tupu program with the kids, and afterwards all the staff, I think the staff got more out of it than the kids because they can comprehend it a bit better.
Yeah.
But they were just like, oh my God, that was amazing. I was like, yeah, it is. And I was like, but did he tell you something that you didn't already know? And then they like thought about it, and I could see them really thinking about it. They're like, what do you mean? And I was like, well,
it's all common sense.
It's all common sense. It's all what we get told all the time. Like, don't let others' opinions, change the way you live your life, and that doesn't shift your focuses and what you want to do or what you're good at or what you find enjoyment in.
Yeah.
Like, it's all just perception of someone else. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And I was like, that's why I guess that's probably why I had a really instant change myself once I started dealing with you and my own personal performance, is because I got that straight away. For whatever reason, the way you came across, I was just like, oh, that's the secret. Like, that's the key. And then it still doesn't, and I said this to the staff the other day too, I was like, it still doesn't pull me, it's still, like, that stuff still happens to me, but it doesn't pull me down the same way, because I'm like, okay, yeah, this is happening, I'm aware of it, what I need to do to change it, rather than thinking like, oh, this sucks, and I can't see a way out here. I'm just like, all right, okay, and I think it annoys my wife a little bit because a lot of stuff I can just brush off, and then, but it really, especially when I was playing, like if people would make comments about me or something would go up on social media, really, really affect her, but it didn't bother me because I'm like, well, who are they? Like, what does it matter? Like, it doesn't matter. My performance has nothing to do with them or their comments or whatever, and doesn't change me as a person, whether that's a good comment or a bad comment. It's still the same.
Yeah.
But and I think it frustrates her that I can just brush things off and carry on, and she's like, oh, you just don't even care. Well, that's the secret.
So the same as what Mark Manson says. I love the way he says it. You've got to get clear what you're going to care about, because people give way too many cares about too many things. And obviously he's got that subtle art of not giving a fuck, and it's like, it's again just such basic common sense. And you're right, the stuff really just helps people. I think it seems to give them permission to do it, because you're right, it's common sense. They get it, they understand the metaphor, it makes sense to them, and then it's just like, oh, it's just like that little moment where they're like, so it's okay to be like that? Yeah. It's okay to follow your inner world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. Right.
Cool. All right. Wow. We're using a lot of good podcast content here, DG. But I suppose one thing I did want to talk about, because there's a lot. Like, we could sit here all day.
Good.
But I understand you're limited on time.
Yeah.
So I figured let's make this a segment kind of podcast, and we'll catch up, over time down the track, and we'll do lots of little things, and we'll pick topics and go for it from there. But one thing I did really want to talk about, and this is something that I've been trying to get across with the podcast, is the psyche of a professional athlete or an elite athlete, and someone that's under immense pressure constantly in day-to-day life, how relatable that is to the so-called real world. And that's one thing that I think I've been able to do effectively through the podcast. Is a lot of people are like, oh man, you rugby players are just like me, and that person might be a fisherman, or they might be a cyclist, or not even athletes, people that are running businesses have got the exact same things and exact same pressures. They just have a different title. So I suppose I'd be really, really keen to talk with you, and I can share a little bit also on my personal experience through that, and how you helped me. But yeah, just that dealing with elite athletes, and we touched on it a little bit there, being stuck in the hole or in the dark place, and I guess the things or constants that you've noticed with athletes so over time and over your time. So just so for a little bit of background for credentials, can you just sort of, I suppose, tell the listeners what teams you've worked with, teams and athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, that when you do what you love with who you love, you start to rack up some successes. So I never set out to do the things I've done, but then just followed, like we were saying before, when we met 2008, I've been working with Hautapu Cambridge Premier rugby team for 3 years before that. And then I was asked to do a little mental skills talk at rugby in Wellington, because there were about 5 of us around the country working in rugby. But I wasn't working, it was still my hobby, because I was clinical psychologist with the Child, Youth and Family and the police, with the child abuse side of things. And so I was doing Tuesday, Thursdays trainings, Saturday game on the bus with the boys. And the wife said, when are you going to start making some money, because you're away from the home a lot doing this? And I went, I hadn't even thought about that. And then, long story short, I was doing this little talk in Wellington, and I was just starting, and there's only like 6 of us in this room, one of the old building, the old waterfront site where the rugby union was. And in their big downstairs room, and the doors opened, and in walked all the super coaches. So Ian Foster, Colin Cooper, Blackadder, I think, that crew. And then they sat down, and then the doors opened again, and in walked Ted, Shag, and Smithy. And they sat down, and the facilitator said, "Oh, carry on." They just come in to listen to what we're talking about. And I probably talked about 30 seconds to a minute, and Wayne Smith put his hand up and said, "I can't understand what you're talking about. I completely disagree." And I was like, "Oh, cheers, Smithy." But anyway, long story.
Rugby in New Zealand.
That's right. Long story short, Fozzie came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, where are you based?" And then that was Hamilton. He said, "Oh, come in and you can meet the coaches." And that was Jaime and Robbo. I think that was them. Oh, maybe Stormy.
Oh,
or was Stormy come the next year?
Yeah, Stormy came the next year as a skills assistant.
Right. Yeah. And then so I talked with him, and then I think there was you may have been in that group, but then
I was there.
There's 9 or so of you guys sat down and listened to me in that little far data room.
That was the pathway 1, pathway 2 speech.
That's right.
I tell a lot of people that.
It's a good one.
Oh, it's so good because it's so true.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. That's where it started, and then it just went nuts from there, because there wasn't anyone really working psychology. It was Gilbert and Noka with the All Blacks. Rod Corbin was with rowing. Gary Hermanson was with the New Zealand Olympic team, and then that was it. There was no one else, and then it just took off because everyone was wanting some mental skills. And because I was a psychologist, I was already in front of the wave. So obviously you and I met each other then, and then I was with the boys for 11 campaigns with the Chiefs. I came on board pretty much the same sort of time with the Sevens, so I was with Gordon Titchens for 10 years. Still with them now with Clark Laidlaw. High performance sport, 3 Olympics. I'll finish off with Paris, that's the 4th one. I was with Japan in the World Cup. So rugby's been the big part of my work. And then some individual athlete campaigns on the Olympic pathways or place stage. I worked with the Magic when they won in 12. 12 was a good year because the Chiefs won. Magic won. I think Lisa won. Did Lisa win her first gold medal in 12? I think that was London.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lisa had a great year. So that year, Lisa had a great year. The Magic did the impossible. The Chiefs did something which no one thought they could. So it was a hell of a year. I remember sitting with Renz and Smithy, because that's a long story. I met, obviously Smithy came to the Chiefs, and he and I became, and still are, worked really closely together. And then I remember Ren saying, when we're reviewing the campaign, looking across me going, "It's been a good year, DG." I went, yeah, it is. So I guess that's probably the background. Clinical psychologist by training, into sport from a hobby. And then there's been some wonderful opportunities to be surrounded by some amazing coaches like Wayne Smith that then allowed me to find my way.
Yeah.
Because I was learning the whole time how sport role versus, serious offenders. Pretty much the same, actually. And then I was just lucky around great. There was some great men in those days, including yourself, where I was able to learn how to roll, and that really shaped me. And then obviously Fozzie was very, Fozzie was very understanding and very permitting of me making mistakes and not being sure how to do my groups. And that was really where I established my group work in rugby. So he was perfect timing because he didn't have any expectations on me. He liked to run his own ship, as we know with Fozzie. So he wanted people that weren't going to be destructive, but he didn't. As long as they weren't damaging, he was fine. And so he and I had lots of conversations after groups about what worked well, what hadn't worked well. So he was key. And then obviously with Renz and Smithy and Tom Coventry and Andrew Strawbridge, that was a huge period of really understanding the high performance picture in sport. So I'll look back on those years with them and feel very grateful for what they allowed me to be part of that established the way that I just roll out wherever I go now as the like it's the non-negotiables.
Yeah.
So that would be the background. Now I'll finish off with this Paris Olympics, and that'll be the sevens, and I'm learning how to be a sheep and beef farm, or more Herefords now. Herefords are my thing.
Yeah.
Herefords and horses. That's what I've got a little farm, but I want to get a bigger farm off the back of Paris on full time.
Yep.
And it's going to be Galbraith, maybe Galbraith Stables or Galbraith Stud, and it'll be a boutique Hereford stud. Well, it might be a commercial herd. It's just, you can do just the same sorts of things. We've got a very good commercial herd now, about 100 cows and horses.
Yeah.
So it's gone from serious offenders back to the land. And some great.
But the land's always been a big part of your life too, eh? Because
Yeah.
I remember when you come in and first spoke to us, you were a possum trapper by trade.
That's right.
Prior to the psychology.
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm. Mum and dad were shepherds and managers who have never owned. I was pretty much trapping possums full time at definitely age 13, 14, but started trapping possums when I was 7. I had 7 years old. I was running 15 traps, which is quite a few traps. I mean, there were a lot of possums then. So it's not like they are now. In many areas with the 1080, there's possum numbers are nothing. Like we'd go out, if we're shooting, we'd shoot 50 to 100 possums in a night, and I'd be trapping. When I was a teenager, I was running 30 traps. So 7 years old, running 15 traps, you're underway.
Yeah.
Possums were. I think that's the benefit of growing up rurally. You're never short of work. Work's just whatever you can think of. You can make money. I was doing possums and plucking rotten sheep because the old man would just come home and say, "Oh, there's a couple of dead ewes down the back face," and it was a big farm that he was a shepherd on.
Yep.
And I'd go hard and race down there, get the wool. $10 wool. If Scour comes around, he'd just take all my wool, give me some cash. It was great as a young man. So that farm beginnings hunting, it was I reckon it's the founding of my character. And then at 13, I was hunting. You wouldn't be allowed to do it now. Sifs would probably get involved. Dad would just drop me off at the end of the road in the Hawke's Bay underneath the Ruahine Ranges. 13 years old, had an old 303. I need to say, I'll see you in 3 or 4 days. And off I'd go. And now, I just look back and go, that was key. And
Built a lot of strength of character.
Yeah, self-reliance. And my greatest strength is my greatest weakness because, I know now myself as I'm quite set on my ways. And I've had to work hard as a dad to let my daughters do stuff because back then I had to do it. And the old man was like that. You want a job done properly, you do it yourself. It's a real deep part of my nature. So it was that was the founding where I started. Then into psychology, which I didn't really, it wasn't an intentional thing. took a year off from college to uni and did a season, taught myself to shear and did a season shearing and knocked off my 200. That killed me. I was in pain every day. I never want to go and shear a sheep again. I'll do the odd one, but it's not something that's very enjoyable. It was that year. Then I went to Canterbury to see if I was any good at footy, and I wasn't, like I mentioned the other day. Then I worked under the Yukon for a season as a hunting guide in between my undergrad and masters. And I still think to these, I look back these days and go, why did I come home?
Yeah.
I only came home because the old man said, because obviously the old man's a big part of my life, and he said, well, you can go to Canada, but you've still got to finish your university, because that was the deal.
Yeah.
So I done my undergrad, went and worked for a year up in the Yukon, the Yukon BC border, and then came back and then finished off my psychology from there, and then just ended up coming back to sport, because after my daughters were born, I found it very difficult to work with men that abused children, and realised I wasn't going to do. I'd get up and go to work, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversations you'd have with people that were really at a point of having to change, or their lives was done, because they weren't going to get out. They were great. Those conversations are so raw, because it's life and death. So I enjoyed that, but realised I don't want to do that for 50 years. And that's where I started into sport. I'd sit down at night because we didn't have a TV, and just started writing ideas about what it could look like as a program. And then I spoke to a number of coaches for 2 or 3 years trying to get into club footy, like Trahonga, Old Boys, Marist, and then Hautapu was where it kicked off.
Who was coaching at Hautapu then?
It was Andrew Douglas was just starting. Yeah, so that was the point. He was just
another clever man.
Yeah.
So, good foresight.
So I met him, and he said, right, you're in. Went to the first training, and it was Thursday night, pissing down with rain, southerly all night. I had just ran around, helped throwing balls back in lazy do it training like I did with us, same thing. And then he goes at the end of training, the boys have gone in the change room. He said, right, you have 10 minutes, see if you're any good. And I looked at him and went, well, I thought that might happen, so I was ready for it.
Yeah.
And then I just told them the Frank and Fabio story.
Yeah.
That I told you guys.
Yeah, they would have loved it.
And honestly,
it's the best changing room, boy, like male orientated conversation you could have, because it sums everything up perfectly, especially around like what we spoke about earlier, the perception of, and it doesn't actually matter,
Exactly. It doesn't matter what you've got. It's your mindset. And then that ended up being like 45 minutes, that chat. I just owned that story, we weaved the story for 45 minutes, and man, they laughed. And then the next week I rock up on the Tuesday, and the captains have obviously gone to Andrew and said, don't you ever put him in after training again. So I was before training in the club rooms while the boys were still in their good kit or coming from work. Yeah. And I never left I never left the club room. So all my talks, because I just do a group talk each week.
Yeah.
And I got graduated up from the club room, the change room after training to be in the club rooms when they were still in their good clothes.
Yeah.
And then they went pretty good. So,
like, it is a long speech, but can you summarise that? Because I know the listeners will be sitting there going, "Oh, what is this?"
Well, essentially, I wrapped a story around two men, both really interested in Tyra Banks, but one man was really well endowed and one wasn't. And then I just broke that down into a metaphor of people get caught up on what they've got and think that's what's going to limit or permit them to achieve their dreams, when really the key limitation is the way they think about themselves and think about what they've got and think about the recipe of what it's required to be great. And that's probably the core of the metaphor to the story. And they're both chasing an impossible dream, which was to marry the most beautiful woman at that time in the world. And both the men had grown up together in the same schools together, the same opportunities together. So everything else was the same, bar their perspective. And the perspective was based on one physiological thing. But it had massive ramifications for how they thought about themselves. They thought about the way the world operated around them and what the rules were and whether the things were going to work out for them or not. So I just broke that basic story down into a way that men would enjoy it and understand it. And I took in 3 brooms. So I had a broom for Tyra Banks with beautiful long flowing hair, and I had a real stubby broom for Frank. And then a really nice broom for the main actor, was Fabio.
Being me.
Yeah, exactly. And the irony was, it's the same speech I did with you guys, the one I used at Hautapu, and
I've told
had
that
the same impact
so many times to people, and then when they hear it, they get it,
Yeah.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So that was that story. I spent a lot of time building around what I knew would be the opportunity. So there are key moments in people's lives where opportunity comes if you're not ready. Because if I hadn't had that story ready and I'd gone in and given a mental skills talk to those boys at Hautapu, they would have gone, who the f is this guy? If that's psychology in sport, we're never going to have anyone in here. And that would have been the opportunity gone, and then nothing else after that would have worked. I wouldn't have been involved with them.
We wouldn't have met.
Wouldn't have met Fozzie.
I would have still sucked
We
at
wouldn't
rugby.
have met. Yeah. That's right. You still would have been absolute cop case, and then none of it would have happened. So it is ironic that, again, we'll talk about various things over time when we chat, but you can't go past preparation and the hard yards, and there is always a price you have to pay. You cannot. It doesn't matter who you are, you cannot escape it. And the universe don't care who you are. The universe is like the bank, and it only accepts the way I look at it, the universe is like a bank, and there's only one currency, and it's effort. You get the effort right, and you've got a good team around you, you're going to do okay, and if you're any good, you're going to do real good. And then it's just like, we'll find out how good you are. And then it's like you and I were saying before, some people have better coordination. It's just a genetic thing. So some people come to a space with more genetic potential. You combine that with great coaching, great work ethic, openness to learn, and you've got something pretty special. But a lot of people don't understand that the universe keeps track of the score, well, it keeps track of the currency, and people try and cut corners. But at the end of the day, I was watching this thing in China actually, where they call it social credit. There's a city of 18 million people, and every corner has cameras, all facial recognition. So they sit and they know exactly where everybody is of those 18 million people in the city at all times. They track what you spend because everything's digital currency. They track exactly what you buy. If you buy alcohol, you lose points. If you buy water, you get points. They look at your shopping list. They look at how you spend your life. They look at what time you arrive at work. They look at what time you go home. Whether you're married, children, or one child, blah, blah, blah. And all it earns points or loses points. And there's only 18,000 people out of 8 million. Yeah, 18,000 out of 8 million that are good citizens. They get discounts on the train and bits and pieces. So it's actually really scary.
Yeah.
Like they call it the social credit system, where everything's digitalised and everything's monitored and you attract. And if you're not paying your debts, they put your face up on the cinemas.
Yeah.
So you go to the cinemas and all these faces pop up of people who are blacklisted because their social credit numbers have got so low. And it's just like, and there's one journalist who spoke out about it, and he went to buy a ticket to get on a train, and it goes rejected, you're blacklisted. He couldn't even buy $1.50, whatever it was, train ticket because he had spoken out about the governance. So the metaphor of that story is, that's communism, or that's stuffed up socialism. But the universe watches.
Yeah.
It watches to see what our integrity credit is. And our integrity credit's just effort, time, doing the right thing the right way, following through, not cutting corners, all of those things that we know equals a good life. And the reason when most people don't have a good life is they haven't earned the credit.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in karma, eh? Like there's a lot to that in the, I don't know. I suppose I kind of live my life by just saying yes. I just say yes to things and it gets me in trouble sometimes too. But a lot of the time it's about, just putting myself out there. You never know what's going to come of it or what's going to happen. And that all came around the time I met you. And we can I suppose we'll start to talk about that a little bit more now as well. But with the change of my mindset, and then, you know, it's just like, oh, you know, as little as like going out and shouting some beers for my mates, you know. Back then I had money, young fella, playing professional rugby, bugger all bills, making a good living, and we'd go out and, you know, I'd shout all my mates' beers that were apprentice builders and, you know, whatever.
Struggling.
Yeah, struggling. And we'd go out and we have a hell of a night. I used to waste the money, but I had the best time, and it's always come back. You know, whenever I've needed anything out of any of those guys through life, whether it's financial or whether it's, you know, a beer.
Or a deck.
A deck or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it just pays itself back. So when you talk about that, you know, the universe watching, and I'm sure everybody listening they'll be able to relate to that. And
it's a genuineness to
experience.
it. Like there's a genuineness. It's not a manipulation of
Yeah.
people or places or spaces to get benefit for yourself. You know, its essence, you know, like I go, effort's the currency, so is social anonymous charity. So if you think about what's the universe taking in as currency and then karma giving you back, I reckon it's all related. Is your genuine effort, integrity, and anonymous service or on charity that no one knows about, giving in a way that no one can get to know, but you're making a difference where there's no social payback.
Yeah.
You know, like your beers weren't done to then get a deck built later on in life, right?
No.
It was just a genuine, I care about you and my friends and I'm happy to look after you because I can.
Yeah.
And it means we have a good time. It's like when you take someone in your car and they want to give you diesel money or whatever it is, it's like, bro, that's an that's like insulting my gift.
Yeah.
I actually want to.
Yeah.
So even though their intention's a lovely one too, but it's just like there's something about that giving. You know, I know we try and help our kids understand that, but we live in an era where there's so much abundance, and everything seems to be about getting up.
Yeah.
So no, that would be. I reckon that's the key part. You're right. The karma bit does come back, and there is always our ancestry is always watching.
Yeah, because I reckon with my career, I think that's why I had a long career, was because of I guess the service I gave to the younger players underneath me. So I genuinely cared about them, and I wanted them to have the experiences that I'd had. You know, I was so fortunate, played professionally for 19 seasons or 20 seasons, 19 years. From the age of 17, I just wanted I wanted people to experience what I'd experienced. I wanted them to feel that euphoric moment of running out to Loftus in a Super Rugby final in front of 60,000 people that hate you. You know, like there's something so like you could never reenact that in any aspect of life. And I wanted people to feel those feelings, and like because I cared about them, they were my mates and we worked hard together. So I wanted to give them every chance to grow, to be able to you know, enjoy that ride for as long as possible. And I reckon that's a big part of why I played for so long, because the universe in its funny way, well, I suppose if you look at it face value, those guys never tried to cut me down or to get rid of me because I cared about them and I was helping them. So if you look at it just pure factual, like the reason I stayed in the game so long is because I didn't have a bunch of young guys tearing up behind me trying to pull me down because they were just I was there trying to get them up to my level, and then, you know, a lot of them carried well past me in terms of what they could do. Like Quinta Pai, great example. You know, within bloody 3 months he was 10 times better than I ever was.
There's something about that, you know, if people are listening and wondering about the recipe for success, we've already touched on 2 or 3 critical things that they can live by every day, which is understanding that the great creator or whatever they believe is always watching, and there is a currency, as well as, you know, that's integrity, effort, and then, you know, we talked about anonymous service, and then we talk about there being a good team player. So there's 3 things that people could put on a Sunday night, sit down with a cup of tea and go, where am I going to do those 3 things this week? They can do it in their organisation. It doesn't matter if they're a water well driller or whatever their station. they can do that. So there's already 3 things that people can start to think about. Are they on a continuum of 0 to 10? Where are they with regards to effort, corner cutting, 4 or 5 out of 10? Are they 8, 9 out of 10? How much do they give charitable wise in the sense of time, volunteer? Easy to put that on your schedule. Hard, but easy. And then that one there. So 3 good ingredients straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, I did want to talk a little bit about, I suppose, my change of mindset once I started dealing, once you come in, and it was like it couldn't have happened better for me personally, the time of my career. So that must have been my 2nd year of Super Rugby. So I'd had a good first year, which often happens, you get in and it's all new and it's all exciting and there's all this extra emotion and I guess attention on you, so everything's heightened. Yeah, a lot of energy, and you're just there's that I call it imposter syndrome. Like I was like, oh, do I really belong here? So you're just doing everything you can to prove that you belong there, and then all of a sudden you start going, wow, and then it's very easy at that time of your life. Like I think I was 22, maybe 20. I think I was 21 when I debuted. So it would have been 22. Very easy to be influenced by what everyone else says about you. So you have a good first year. Yeah. Easy just to sit back, like, I've got this. I'm the man. And then Gats actually was really big for me too around that same time. So he was coaching Waikato leading into 2005, 6, 7, I think, before he left. Yeah. And then he was assistant coach in 2007, my first year in the Chiefs as well, and I worked really well with him and Fozzie. He got on to me. I was always a perfectionist, and the listeners would have heard me say this before, and I never wanted to fail. Like so I would purposely hold myself back because I didn't want, I feared failing. I didn't want to make a mistake. And then he started to push me to be like, no, you've got to make mistakes to get better. Like I would rather you try that. And then, it doesn't work out, we'll learn from it. But don't sit back and not get involved. Like you're too good not to push yourself that little bit more, which I started to comprehend a little bit, and I was trying to bring it into training. But once you come in and gave the Fabio and Frank speech, it just resonated straight away. And I was like, I care way too much about what other people think about me. And then being able to, I still care. I don't think I'll ever lose that. I don't think
nor should you.
I don't think any human ever will. The ones that
don't have that are very bad. Whatever they're doing, it's a very, very small fraction of the population. But that small fraction of the population are doing something bad to the planet or bad to others. Yeah. And that's where they live their days.
I cared a lot about what other people thought, and I'm glad social media wasn't a big thing then, because I don't know how I would have personally handled that. But when it came into, I guess, the world, I was in a better place personally with my career and my mindset and being able to deal with pressure. I feel it's pretty hard now for younger people going in, and I'm still a strong believer that we start, especially in rugby in New Zealand, we start them too young professionally.
And cameras are there way too early.
Yeah, way too early. Everything's on. We're setting them up to.
We're doing it to them.
Yeah. That's all. First 15 rugby's on TV, so we're creating all this hype. When I suppose the big scheme of the world, high school rugby's not that great. You know what I mean? It's cool. It's a beautiful.
It's just first 15 footy.
Yeah.
So it's
a beautiful game, and it's awesome. But in the scheme of, it's hyped up to be like Super Rugby, and they actually think they are that good, but. I can understand why. If all my first 15 games were on TV, I would have thought the exact same way. I was scoring tries every week, kicking goals, and I would have thought I was the man, and I would have been treated like the man at school too. But back then, no one knew unless they came watch the game, and there was only
this is family.
Just family. And then my old man was never one to pump me up. He put me in my place pretty quickly. So it's just that timing for me personally was just perfect, because then I learned, you came and gave that speech, and then I started to realize, okay, I'm worrying too much about what I'm not doing effective, and then I've got the fear of failing, and I'm worried too much about what other people think. And then through our sessions, conversations, coffees, over time, well, it didn't even, to be fair, it didn't take long.
No.
Did it really?
No.
Like it was...
No, it resonates pretty quickly.
Yeah. And then the one thing I always remember is the snots, the tackles. So for me, my defense was a big thing that was letting me down, but it was the exact same thing. I was worried about what other people thought. So I missed one, I'd miss 10, not 10, but that's what would happen, because I was just like, oh shit, everyone's looking at me, and whatever, and they'd be in the paper, and
then domino effect.
Yeah, domino effect, and then my whole mindset, psyche was gone, and you're like, who gives a shit about how many you miss, how many people you're going to smash, and how many you're going to snot, and then remember we used to count them.
We did, yes, that's right. And check it at half time.
Yeah, half time, you'd look at me across the changing room and hold up your fingers, like how many, or you'd ask me how many, and they'd hold up how many I thought, and then you'd come back with your opinion, and and it was amazing, just that one flip of like, okay, and then I went out there with no fear of missing. I was like, who am I going to get next? And nothing changed. I still practiced the same way.
Still the same.
Yeah, still had...
Nothing changed, but everything changed.
Yeah, nothing changed, but everything changed. It was the whole mindset thing.
Yeah.
Do you notice anything different with elite athletes being able to grasp that? Or is it just some people just grasp it quicker than others?
There's, your upbringing really helped you be able to recognise that very quickly and make that small shift that made a massive magnitude change. So I like, another metaphor is cake and icing. A lot of people are stuck in the icing, and they focus on the icing and want the icing and addicted to the icing, and that's obviously the outcome and the targets that they're seeking, and they forget to bake the cake. And so there's layers to the cake, which allow someone to then release into the performance moment and play instinctively. So if you've had a good upbringing, you've already got some good layers settled in that cake recipe. If you've missed out on a few things when you've been growing up, then there's more work to do in the foundational stages around baking that cake. But again, you can really make those shifts quite quickly, because again, it's all common sense. And then once you have those layers in place, I do see athletes respond and fly like you did, and depending on their ability as well, you combine that mind shift change, bake a great cake, and they're good, and they've got a great coach, and they've got a good trainer, and then you can see some magic happen pretty quickly. So again, it's like you and I've touched on today a number of times, the actual ingredients aren't complicated. The perspective change that comes from that's the key. The level of maturity that you have is the critical component to be able to see and make the perspective change. And so if we've got low maturity, it takes longer.
Yeah.
If you've got high maturity, which is no different than, 0 to 5, you've been raised pretty good as an infant. You've been, primary school's been okay, and you've done okay there. So now you've got some good flow going. You're going to end up with a pretty mature, 12, 13-year-old if that's happened. And then if high school's been okay, then you're going to hit 18, 19, and you're going to have a mindset where you think you're ready, your maturity's high, and that's a completely different, working with that in that space when maturity's high, the cake flows together real fast. And, you were mature for your age, you had a good upbringing, you've been really grateful, and we talk about your routines on game days, highlighted that, how important that foundational stuff was for you, and then we can operate real fast.
Yeah.
But if it's low maturity, then low maturity usually means that they'll struggle with their weekly habits and their daily functioning. Like they won't be so good at scheduling and organising and keeping the house tidy and just doing those basics of life.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at a longer term project, because you've actually got to grow the maturity to then bake the cake to then release from instinct into the performance moment. Because if your maturity is low, it's very hard to then be instinctive in the moment, because you're emotional in the moment. And that's the difference. There's a difference between being emotional and being instinctive. Being instinctive is usually a cold, calculated killer.
Yeah.
And they are deadly and accurate and repeatedly accurate, whereas emotional can be inconsistent, it can be impulsive, it can be unreliable. So there's real difference in that space when you look at the character of performance. So I want someone to be mature with meaning and good, and then you'll get your weekly schedule right, and then they'll be ready.
Sam King.
Yeah, that's right. But if you're emotional, then something could happen with your girlfriend on Tuesday and you're a wreck right through the rest of the week. You haven't done work, you haven't prepared properly, your mind's not in the game, you're late for the bus, all these things are repeatedly, for me in my time, the number of players have been late for buses to pre-season games or late from the hotel, and they're always lower maturity. So that mark is key. So if I think about growing children to be ready for a high-performance sport, find experiences for them to be mature, and then the rest will take care of itself. Good parenting raises mature, self-reliant, interdependent children. Over-controlling parenting, abusive parenting, neglectful parenting ends up with someone with low maturity, and they're always behind the 8 ball. Even if they had the talent, the character is not where it could be, and the maturity is low, and then you've got a huge amount of maintenance around that athlete to help them be in a place where they're ready for coaching, to do the training, to be prepared, and then hold to a game plan and know what their role is. Like those basic things, if you're all over the shop during the week, you might have the odd game every now and then where your talent shines because everyone else around you is playing well and gives you a platform, and you become the super kid. But you and I both know those guys have a hell of a road, and they are high maintenance for any organisation or coaching crew. It's like, how the hell do we help them get to the game?
Yeah, and you see it, because you're like, oh my God, he's brilliant. And then the next week he's like you just want to pull your hair out.
Yeah.
Like, how can we get this guy just to do that each week?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's a big part of why I had a long career too, was because I was dependable. So I didn't have the big spikes.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the big troughs either. So
no risk.
No, it was just like the coach knew what they were going to get. And I suppose the more experience I got with that, I understood that. Where when I was in the moment, I was just doing everything I could, to play and to get better and the rest of it. But and I would see, some other teammates would just be like, "Wow, he's the man," and then it'd be like, "Oh shit, he was off today." But like I would never really had those games. Like I'd have don't get me wrong, I had bad games, but my bad game wasn't horrendous. But also my really good game wasn't, out of this world either. It was just pretty solid. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe we just give some thought to, I reckon I like the idea of having across the year, you just pop in every now and then and we just run through some themes and things that might be going on, just to wear the time. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. You're a busy man, DG.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. It's lovely that I don't work up Monday to Sunday either, which is quite nice because it just rolls.
Yeah.
I often don't know what day it is. Well, my calendar tells me what day it is.
Yeah.
And the sun tells me what time it is.
Yeah. It's time to go to bed. It's
Well,
got dark.
that's right. In the winter, it means I have to now wear my torch when I exercise. It's like that's where I go, okay, you still have to operate.
Yeah.
But no, it's been lovely chatting, and we'll do that. I'm happy to do that,
sporadically.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
No, it's cool. Well, also the listeners too, or chuck some stuff up on social media. So if there's anything that they want to, also just chuck it through, and I'll compile a bit of a list, and we'll pick our way through it. Yeah, because I suppose the mind is such an interesting space that a lot of people know is important, but they don't necessarily understand quite. Didn't have the tools that I had. We'll just say that to be able to unleash or unlock that potential that I did have, and it was real awesome hearing that. The old cake analogy, and for people to be able to hear that too, because it does make a big difference.
It makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you very much, DG.
Good start.